So we'd love to start off with you just basically saying your name and what you do in your own words.
Sure. Jake Whitman, founder of Really Good Boxed Wine, formerly from Cincinnati originally, moved back about a year and a half ago, and spend pretty much every waking moment thinking about how to introduce boxed wine to the world.
Yeah, definitely. Well, you touched on kind of the follow-up question, which is your Cincinnati origin story. Yeah. Are you originally from Cincinnati? And you can even answer the age-old question,
what high school you went to?
What school you go to, yeah.
What school, which is the high school. Yeah. So from Cincinnati, grew up in Clifton, so just up the road from downtown, and spent my life here until I went away to college. I went to Walnut Hills High School, so kind of Cincinnati kid through and through.
Definitely, cool.
Where did you go to college?
Went to UC Santa Barbara. So it was a Midwest kid who got to spend 4 years living on the beach, which was like a completely wild experience, especially I think like 96% of the school are in-state. Yeah. And so everyone's used to it and they're like, they've kind of been there, done that. And I'm like, this is amazing. Like, this is wild. We get to live on the beach. Like, look around where we are. It's incredible. So, I got very lucky to be able to spend some time in California in college.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's cold today, so I could go there now.
It was always like around November, and now that I'm a little further separated, but like a lot of my friends from California would be posting beach pictures in November, and you're like, yep, that was nice. That was nice. Yeah.
So after college, did you stay in California for a longer period?
I didn't. 7 days after I graduated, I hopped in a car and drove across the country to Philadelphia. So I moved to Philly and did Teach for America for a couple of years. So I was a high school special ed math teacher in a big kind of comprehensive public high school in Philadelphia for my first 2 years of my career post-college.
Yeah. So I learned a little bit about you doing some research,
Okay.
Hard-hitting journalism. I'm going to go back to that. I'm going to be a journalist in my next life. So you did Teach for America. You wrote a book, but talk us through your resume from that Teach for America up to Really Good Boxed Wine.
Sure. So Teach for America, again, high school special ed math teacher, mostly 11th grade students. It was the most emotionally draining 2 years of my life, but incredibly rewarding. And, once the doors of my classroom closed, it was an amazing experience having that relationship with the kids. Unfortunately, Philly had a $650 million budget deficit my second year.
Wow.
And they laid off 1,500 teachers. It was last in, first out. So they basically drew a line on seniority, and anyone below that line was cut. And I was one of those teachers because I was only 2 years in. And so from there, I actually started a nonprofit called STARS, which stands for Sports Teaching and Reaching Students. So we were supporting athletic teams and programs in low-income Philly schools, sponsored 3 different schools, supported about 150 athletes across 15 teams, rebuilt the South Philadelphia High School weight room, outfitted the Vox High School basketball team, and sort of that kind of stuff. And then use a lot of we sort of had programming that helped connect success that the kids felt in the field to the classroom. So that was kind of the mission of the organization, was to use athletics to kind of build up confidence, help these kids build up confidence. And while I was doing that, I noticed an opportunity in the Teach for America recruitment space where a lot of people were going in with very different levels of information about how informed they were about the process. So someone who went to an Ivy League school or like Michigan or Virginia, one of the big schools, might know 25 people. They had a lot of insight into the program. Someone who went to a smaller school might know one, maybe nobody. And we're at this huge disadvantage. And for an organization that sort of was all about educational equity, it felt actually very unequal.
Yeah.
And so I wrote a book that sort of, without giving away the secrets, it was more saying, hey, this is sort of how you prepare for this interview to become the best teacher that you can. Wrote a book helping people with that application, with the admissions process. Started a publishing company, published that book, and then actually published a second book from somebody else under that company. So the first 5 years of my life were sort of this like nonprofit, social entrepreneurship, teach education was really my passion. Like it still really is kind of like my passion issue. But I thought, I'm 24, 25 years old. I have no idea what the hell I'm doing. And so maybe now's the time to kind of learn how to run a business. And so debated business school, but being from Cincinnati, P&G was always in my mind. And started calling around and called pretty much everyone I could think of who had any connection to P&G, and got a foot in the door and applied and interviewed and got hired into brand management at P&G. So that was my first time coming back to Cincinnati, was to be a brand manager at P&G. Spent about 5 years there. I mean, I love the company. I love P&G. I think it's the best. I still believe it's the best place in the world to learn how to own and operate and run a business. Worked on super cool brands. Old Spice and Gillette were the two ones I spent the most time on, mostly kind of the day-to-day North America business. Spent a little bit of time doing global work for Gillette, particularly in Latin America, which was also super interesting. But mostly kind of in like the running of the business side of brand management, which was something I learned I was really interested in. Yeah. And so I was about 4.5, 5 years in. I was like, maybe I should think about tech, and the world is going toward tech. And in my opinion, and I really believe this, like in 5 to 10 years, if you're not a technology company, you're probably not going to succeed, whatever technology means for your industry. Yeah. And I wanted to learn that world. So put some feelers out again, got hired at Intuit by a former P&G'er to run the go-to-market team for the Intuit brand, which was a really fun, like, corporate marketing role. It was like big strategic development of like this 40-year-old technology company that had never really put its name out in the world. I mean, everyone knows QuickBooks and TurboTax and Mint, but Intuit really means nothing to people. And so worked on that for a couple of years. My boss went to be the CMO at SoFi, and within a couple of months, I had followed her to become the head of product marketing for one of SoFi's products, their money product. And that got me back into running more kind of like day-to-day business, which is what I enjoyed doing. The Intuit work was super interesting, but it was like broad awareness metrics that we were measuring quarterly around, like it was very sort of like fluffy metrics, honestly. Yeah. And I wanted to get back into like the day-to-day like churn of a business. And so that I was able to do that at SoFi. So that's all sort of out in the Bay Area. And then I was like, I've been in the corporate world for a lot longer now than I planned. I originally planned to stay for a couple of years, learn how to run a company and go start something again. And I was, I'd been about a decade in the corporate world and decided, maybe now's the time to go kind of take the leap back into entrepreneurship. So my wife and I during COVID decided to move back to Cincinnati, mostly because we love it here. I mean, honestly, like that is why we're back, is because we wanted to be here. And I started looking, my original idea was I started looking for a company to purchase. Actually, I'd sort of put a fund together to kind of look around for companies to buy in the city. I also started getting involved in angel investing with Queen City Angels here in town, to kind of like learn that side of the business, and both as the entrepreneur side and as the investor side. And then Really Good Box Wine popped up as an idea, and I started pulling the thread and investing a little more time and money, and then a little bit more time and money. And all of a sudden I was like, I have to go do this. So
this is your creation. It wasn't something that you bought.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. So cool. I put the idea of buying something on pause, and that was, I think that I incorporated, the idea came in March of last year, incorporated the business in April, and decided to go full time at it in May. So it was kind of a quick.
It's really fast.
It was a quick transition. Yeah. It was a quick transition.
Well, and it's blowing up. It's blowing up really quickly. I mean, we've seen articles from, I think, Washington Post, and you're clearly know what you're doing, getting the word out.
We're working on it. Yeah. It's no easy, getting the word out is hard and long and expensive and all of those things, but it's fun seeing the brand out in the world and people enjoying it.
Yeah. This was April of 2022, this year, right?
2021.
2021. Okay.
Yes,
okay.
2021. Yeah.
But still quick turnaround.
Yeah. That's crazy.
So I've been doing it since then. Yeah. I did a pilot in Cincinnati in August. So I'm a big fan of just like, get something out in the market, even if it's not perfect, and just see how people react. And the market reacted really well. So then did a second pilot in November of last year. That test kind of went well too. And that's when I decided to spend a month out in Sonoma, put the supply chain together. And then we fully launched, like fully nationwide in January of this year.
Is that the tech background that gives you that mentality, like to get something out and iterate, basically?
Yeah, I think so. It's funny. Spending time at P&G is definitely getting more lean and is able to work faster, I think, even though when I was there. But it's a very disciplined company. There's a lot of process for good reason. They're spending, it might take $250 million to set up a paper line, right? Like you're spending a whole lot of money on this stuff. And sales cycles are long. You have to work on Walmart and Target sales cycles, which can take 9 months to a year. So for good reason, it just takes a long time to do anything. SoFi, on the other hand, like we would put something in a new idea for a product and market on Tuesday, and on Thursday we'd read the results, and on Friday we'd have a meeting of what we were going to do. Are we going to keep going? Are we going to pivot? Are we going to invest or not? And it was much more. It's literally like from years to days sometimes, which is a little bit of a jarring. Yeah. So I had a little bit of a learning curve going into that world and realizing we could actually work that fast.
Yeah, definitely.
Did you also skip over, you started a publishing company when you were like 24? How many, like I was like, wait, he said that so fast. How many businesses have you started? Because I feel like it's almost on two hands.
It would be Stars, the nonprofit.
Okay.
Pine Street Press, which is the publishing company, which is essentially defunct. Now, I mean, as an entity, it still technically exists, but I haven't done anything with it since I published the second book. And then Ludlow Capital, which is the search LLC, basically to look to search to buy something. And then Really Good Box Wine. So 4.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah. It's exciting.
And he also, so I went to University of Cincinnati and I studied marketing.
Yeah.
But like my dream was to be a brand manager at P&G, and it's hard to get in the door, but the community, like Cincinnati as a community, I feel like you can really put your feelers out there, and there's a lot of connections. A lot of my professors actually were like adjunct. They worked at P&G.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's crazy that you were able to get into that role with you didn't have marketing experience really.
No, I mean, I got lucky in a few ways. I found someone who was willing to sit down and look at my resume and just like take a shot at it. I think the luckiest thing that I had was the guy the brand manager who hired me, who ultimately said, yes, I want that person on my team, was a little bit of an unconventional brand manager. I mean, he's to this day has had one of the biggest impacts on my career of anybody. And he's a phenomenal human being. He's at Coca-Cola now. He's not at P&G anymore. But his wife's a teacher and he came from IT. He didn't come from kind of traditional marketing background. And I think he saw the book and Teach for America and like some of these things and was like, I'm willing to take a shot on this, even though it's a less traditional path. And he didn't have some of the biases and, that I think some people have when they came from a more traditional path. So I got a little bit lucky and the right person, the right role on the right person's team just happened to open up when I was applying.
I'm really interested to hear about how you got into like the venture capitalism, and specifically Brad and I were talking, you were in California and we were both saying like wine and venture capitalism is like the thing in Cali, and then you brought it to Cincinnati. And being from here, I know I'm from here as well. So, and I actually moved back during COVID from California myself, so I can totally relate.
Totally.
Yeah. But
something that draws you back here.
Yeah,
it's great.
We say
boomerang.
It's a boomerang.
Yeah.
But how did you get into that piece of it? Because and I think for a lot of people, venture capitalism, people as a whole think like you have to be super rich, you have to like have a ton of connections to get into that, and it's just one of this like
it's like a mystique, like it's you can't get to it basically.
Right. That's how I feel like the conception is for that. So how did you, like, I know you said you started in California, involvement in that, but if you could kind of go into detail with the
Sure.
Queen City, what was the name of it?
Queen City Angels.
Queen City Angels, yeah.
Which is sort of the step before venture capital, just to sort of like walk through the fundraising sort of at the beginning. You do like friends and family, which is like you need $20,000 to get something off the ground. Uncle Larry has some money, or Aunt Sally has some money, and they lend you, they give you $25,000 or something like that. So that's kind of the earliest stage. Then you get into angels, which is typically, more structured, usually higher wealth individuals, but sometimes is formed around a group, and sometimes it's more operates kind of individually as angels. And then once you get into higher levels of funding, call it your Series A's and up, Series B's especially and up, that's when you start getting into kind of the more formal venture capital world. And so the Queen City Angels operates like very much squarely in that angel round, basically, where they're writing, $200,000 to $1 million checks or so, kind of in between the true early stage startup and the venture rounds.
Yeah.
So I was watching. So you're right. Out in San Francisco, like venture capital money is everywhere, and like everyone's got an idea and everyone's starting something. And I was watching people, sometimes friends of friends, or just people out in the world who were just like throwing $10,000 checks anywhere. Like anyone had an idea. Sure. Like they had either worked for an early stage tech company that went public and they had a couple $1 million in the bank or whatever. And I was like, this is not a smart way to do this. This is just not disciplined. Like in most startups fail, as we all know. And so I was interested in the space, but I didn't want to do it the way that they were doing it. I also didn't have like millions of dollars in the bank to go do it. And so when I was back here, I actually gotten one of my wife's good friends. Her dad is very involved with Queen City Angels, and has sort of been like a serial entrepreneur throughout his life. He's bought and sold businesses. He started businesses. He spends most of his time now being very actively involved in QCA and sort of leading due diligences and sitting on boards of the companies in the fund, mentoring entrepreneurs and that kind of thing. And so I was actually talking to him about the idea of search, about buying a business. And at the end of our conversation, he just like brought up Queen City Angels. He's like, oh yeah, I'm involved in this thing. I was like, tell me more about that. And he told me, and I was like, that's really interesting. I'd love to is there a way for me to get involved? And he's like, well, QCA has what's called an Ascent program, where for a significantly lower dollar amount, you can basically be a junior member in the fund. And so it's a one-time investment into the fund. You get to do all due diligence and screening committees. You sit in on meetings. You just don't get a vote you don't get a formal vote for whether or not a company is funded, which honestly, for the amount that we're investing versus the full members, I think is fair. But other than that, it's a way to kind of like learn the ropes if you don't want to commit to the, 6-figure plus yearly investments that most that the full-time angels are committing to. So I just was like, all right, sign me up. Let's do it. And I put my investment in and kind of was off to the races. And that was a little over 2 years ago now. So I've been kind of in and out, I would say, as I've Really Good Box Wine has picked up. I spend less time involved on the QCA side, but still, call into some of the meetings, read the screening reports. Sometimes we'll sit in on some due diligence work if it's a industry I know particularly, if I know particularly well. So, try and stay as involved as I can at this stage, I would say.
Yeah. What's your perspective of the startup community here in Cincinnati? Like, what are the exciting things that are happening that maybe the average listener wouldn't know about?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of exciting things happening in the city. I think it's a very tight-knit, supportive community, which I get asked a lot, like, would you have been, I left San Francisco to start a wine company in the Midwest. Like, It kind of doesn't make sense. And I get asked that question, like, would you have been better off starting this in Sonoma or Napa or San Francisco? I'm like, no way. Like, we can run the business from here, and the support that the Cincinnati community has for entrepreneurs, it definitely doesn't exist out there. And so I have found it to be an incredibly kind of supportive community, both from like sort of the institutions, the centrifuges and all of that of the world, as well as just sort of the other entrepreneurs in the city. But really interesting. There's really interesting tech happening now. There's some cool AI brands that are companies that are out there. I think like what 80 Acres is doing is absolutely incredible. Yeah. Like, they are changing the way people think about eating and food. Like, that's an amazing, they are just crushing it. Like,
you don't think of farm and tech startup,
right,
in the same sense.
But to the point, like, I think everything that's going to be successful is going to be sort of tech enabled, and they've done a great job of doing that. And then you have your your other like kind of CPG brands. I mean, Catherine Baxter who started Netty Pickleball is a really good friend of mine, and her brand's awesome. And we see each other all the time. And you've got like these kids, these students at Xavier who started Ripple water bottle companies where they're selling super high end water bottles and then digging wells in Africa for using the profits from that business to dig wells, and they're doing it in a much cheaper way. So like there's really like innovative people here. P&G, I think, has a P&G and Kroger and all the other businesses, I think, have a big impact on kind of fostering that sense of community here. I hope it keeps growing and becoming bigger. You know, I think other cities also have great startup hubs as well. And
Sure.
But I've really enjoyed being part of the community here.
We've got an idea for a future event. We can do pickleball and wine and maybe have some clients
Done.
out, you know?
I love it.
I love it.
You've dabbled in obviously so many different industries and different startups and have quite a lot of experience, especially at your age. Do you have any advice for young entrepreneurs, just in general, of like, obviously maybe finding a mentor, or what would you say to someone that is just getting started?
Yeah. I'll tell you what I always, whether it's sort of live in a conversation or directly, I think it's really important to fall in love with entrepreneurship and not the idea of entrepreneurship. It is very glamorous. The billionaire entrepreneurs are the celebrities of our generation, and that is super rare and virtually never happens. And so what you're more likely to be doing, especially in the early days, is whatever the equivalent of cleaning up vomit in your bathroom at a bar is for your industry, right? So those are you have to do everything from pitching investors at the top end, or pitching for big accounts at big CPG or whatever industry in, all the way down to like submitting paperwork for like Ohio unemployment taxes and sort of everything in that entire spectrum. And sometimes those things take hours and hours, and you just have to find the time. So like the actual action of entrepreneurship is just a lot more broad than I think even some people realize. And it's really easy to fall in love with the idea of it. But you have to really want it. That being said, if you do want to go do it and you're like committed that you do want to go do it, I say go for it. Like I've jumped around industries a lot, so I'm maybe a little bit biased this way, but like if you see a bigger opportunity out there to do something else and you want to take the shot, I think it's worth taking the shot at it. If nothing else, if you completely fail and bomb and flame out, which who knows, like really good box wine could still do that, right? And I don't think it will, and I'm confident it won't, but like sure. You learn a hell of a lot, and I think it only makes you better at the next one that you do, or better if you go back into the corporate world. You learn things and you get to build things in the way that very few people get to do in their lives. Yeah,
definitely. So I think you touched on this for a second, but why wine? Like why wine industry?
I have no wine background.
Yeah.
That's what I know. I was dying to hear this answer.
I'm sure you probably do, drinking wine.
As a consumer, I love wine. Yeah. No, it's so being from Cincinnati, we're like beer and bourbon country, right?
Yeah.
We're not really wine, although we have an amazing history with Longworth.
The wine industry started here in Cincinnati.
Basically.
The American wine industry.
The American wine industry, basically. Like the size of hills in Mount Adams were covered in vineyards back in the day.
Oh, yeah. I read that sign. I live in Mount Adams.
In your neighborhood.
Yeah, and I remember seeing this sign like this, all the land was a vineyard, but I didn't know the whole history.
Yeah,
cool.
It's a fascinating history. It's sort of poetic that I came back to Cincinnati to start a wine company in some ways. But the business started truly as like a consumer. I mean, we'd been in California, in San Francisco for about 4 years, and had spent more and more time in wine country. Got to know really one person in the industry really well, and it was the sort of the founding story. Call it is. It was March of last year, so about a little over 18 months ago, and my wife and brother and I were sitting around drinking a bottle of rosé in Santa Monica. My brother lives in Venice. And the idea of box wine came up, and we're like, Grace and I had bought boxes every once in a while. Like throughout COVID, we liked a lot of the benefits of it. Like we liked just having wine on tap on the counter, and like it was more sustainable, and like we just like liked the benefits and never could find one we liked.
Yeah.
Like we were just always super disappointed in the quality. Tried different varietals, different brands, and all that. So the idea we had talked about it maybe once or twice, but we really like started talking about it in that afternoon in the sun in Santa Monica, which is a beautiful time to talk about something like this. And so I went home and spent like 7 hours just like engrossed in researching this thing of like, is it technically possible to do this? Why isn't it happening today? Like, what's the process for doing this? Are there like just sort of like researching the whole, what are the market trends in alternate packaging? What's the size of the wine industry? Like all sort of the basic sort of analysis to figure out like, is there something here? I came out, I was like, I think there's a big opportunity here. And so the next day I called my friend Allie Ketchum, who owns a winery up in Healdsburg, California, Ketchum Estate. They make this wonderful Pinot Noir. They've become good family friends of ours. And I was like, I can't get this out of my mind now. I've just spent the last 7 hours researching it. Like, what do you think? And if you like it, do you want to do the first one together? Just get something out the door. And she's like, I love it. Let's do it. So the next day we brought her GM on the phone. They call her the director of happiness, which is exactly who she is. And we spent another couple hours talking, and we're like, all right, let's get a plan together and let's do it. Let's make a couple hundred of them and do this test and just see if people like it. And it was kind of like off to the races from there.
Was it the first one? Was it a Pinot Noir?
It was.
Yeah.
Yummy.
And we're actually on December 1st releasing our first reserve wine, our Pinot Noir Reserve, which to start will be available to our monthly subscribers only, and then we'll open it up to the public. Yeah. But it's like just unbelievably good wine.
Is the material like a traditional like the box wine that I've had is just like cardboard and plastic? Is that the same materials that you've used? Okay.
Yeah. I mean, the format is amazing, and it has a stigma attached to it, and that's like all of our barriers to getting people to try it or buy it is around the stigma of the format. But it's more lightweight. It's a reduced carbon footprint, finished over 50%. Just the boxes in bags versus the bottles is like an 85% carbon footprint reduction in packaging. It stays fresh for 6 weeks after you open it, and so like you can open it and just have a glass and not have to worry about the whole bot and drinking the whole thing. So like the format itself is amazing, and we could have gone create a fake oak barrel. You could do stainless steel like there's a million. It's a bag, right, inside of a structure. But in the end, like the whole vision was we could now invest in the quality of the wine more than the packaging, and like let's celebrate the packaging. Let's not apologize for the box, but like let's really like celebrate this format. That's an incredible format, other than just like the stigma of the last 20 years.
Yeah. Do you have any competitors? Because I do love the fact that the box wine lasts forever. Because some people I won't drink a whole bottle in one night. I know that's popular, but like, and I waste wine all the time.
Totally.
Like,
and then you feel guilty about it.
Yeah.
Right.
And I literally have an old half bottle of wine in my fridge, and I'm just like, I don't want to throw it away, but it's definitely bad.
Yeah,
like it's not, it is not good.
Yeah.
But so that's really, I didn't realize it was 6 weeks. That's a really long time.
Well, and our box has 4 bottles of wine in it. And so it can last you a really long time. And with bulk, we can sell it for about half the price of what the bottles would cost. So we're selling, the quality of our wines would go for probably $30 to $40 per bottle in a store. Like that's kind of the quality that we shoot for, and we sell them for about half the price per bottle.
And so it's just the packaging alone saves that much. And is there anyone else in the space that is doing like that high end? There's
a couple others who we're all sort of popping up at similar times, and each have our own sort of like opinion and perspective in the space. But at our core, it's a similar message of like, let's celebrate this format. It's an amazing format, and we can give you better wine for less cost in a more sustainable way that's actually better fits your lifestyle anyway than bottles. So there's a few of us that are starting to pop up. Yeah.
That's cool. My father-in-law went on a big fishing trip in Canada, and they're like, you have to get on the little plane to go where there's no cell service and everything. And they took a box of wine because they had a plan for a nice meal that they were putting together, and that's what they drank around the table. Yeah.
It's perfect. Like for travel, you go on the boat, you don't want glass clinking around, right? You can have, and so you're either drinking canned wine, which hasn't really picked up, there are some examples, but hasn't really picked up, or, you're drinking something that's not wine, because having glass bottles doesn't really make sense for boats and planes and all kinds of travel. RVs, like people buy $1 million RVs and then put $10 Boda boxes, $15 Boda boxes in them.
Yeah.
It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. The space saving is ideal too. Like that's really cool. Yeah. I know you've mentioned that like the community here, especially for startup, is so unique. If you could go into more detail describing your experience with the community in Cincinnati and what you feel is unique about it compared to, the West Coast.
Sure. I mean, it's definitely smaller, which means that there are fewer people who are out there starting things, which means I think anybody, in a smaller startup environment will get a little bit more attention, which I think is a good thing. I don't say that to like disparage the city. I think it's actually a great thing because it makes it a really great place to start a business. But I work out of Union Hall half the time, and Pete Blackshaw has become a pretty good friend of mine, and we talk about the business, and he posts on LinkedIn about us and writes, and helps make introductions and that kind of thing. And the entire Centrifuge kind of organization has been super helpful. The Main Street Ventures teams, they've become friends of mine as well. And Queen City Angels is sitting in our backyard. It's actually the biggest angel association in the United States, I think, maybe number 2, but it's one of the biggest in the United States right now. And that's an incredible resource for whether you're raising money through them because they're very actively in the startup world here, or just as a resource for mentoring and that kind of thing. So I just find it to be like, if you've got a question, there's someone out there who's willing to help and make an introduction for you. And if you need, if you're struggling with something, need to find fundraising, need to do any of the zillions of things that you have to do in a startup, I just find people are willing to like, yeah, I'll help you. Like, yeah, I'll make that introduction for you. Or yeah, like, why don't you come meet this person? I'm getting a drink. I've had some people who are like, hey, I have someone coming into town. I'm going to be getting a drink at this bar on Wednesday night. If you happen to pop in, I'll introduce you. And so you just go in and pop in and say hi. And that may or may not happen in a city like San Francisco, where it's a little more competitive. There's a little bit more, so there's just so much more tech startup activity happening. Yeah,
definitely. What's your kind of favorite neighborhood in the city? Maybe you have multiple, but like where do you like to spend a day?
I mean, I have a soft spot for Clifton. I grew up there. I love the neighborhood. I love Ludlow. It's changed in some ways, but sort of looks the same as when I grew up there, in like the best ways possible. And diverse, eclectic, fun, interesting neighborhood. So I don't spend as much time there as I would like, but try and spend some time in Clifton when I can. I live in OTR and love the neighborhood. We live on Republic Street, right up the street from Salazar, and sort of right in the heart of it. And we've got Washington Park on one side, and Vine Street and then Main Street on the other, which is great.
It's a nice little spot where you're like, it's quiet enough on that street, but you're like 1 block away. You can get anything you want.
Yeah, it's great. It's great. We love being back in OTR. But I don't know. Every neighborhood has its interesting, unique things about it. I mean, Hyde Park Square is great. Pleasant Ridge is really like growing and developing. East Walnut Hills has become a place we often go for either bars or restaurants or whatever. So even, Northern Kentucky obviously is, both Newport and Covington have a lot going for them as well. So I don't know. I mean, we end up getting stuck in OTR a lot just because we can walk everywhere and there's so much around us, but we try and explore the other neighborhoods as best as we can.
Definitely. Yeah. Definitely. Pleasant Ridge. It's a place to be.
Yeah.
That's where I live.
Yeah, that's right. Northside, like,
Northside's so cool.
Such a fun. I spent a lot growing up in Clifton. We spent a lot of time in Northside when I was a kid, and similarly has like things that are still like exactly the same as when I was growing up there. It's like, it has the same vibe, but also some really interesting, cool new stuff going on there. So, yeah.
What are some of your favorite things to do in the city? I know you've mentioned all these great neighborhoods, which, but as far as activities go, what are some of your favorite things to do?
I picked up mountain biking when I was out in California. And so Devou Park has amazing trails, and don't get out as much as I would like to, but try and get out sometimes. Obviously, summer is better for that than winter.
Yeah.
I grew up playing in the Cincinnati Symphony Youth Orchestra. And so the symphony I love the arts in the city. I think it's amazing that we have for such a small city compared to other cities, that we have all of the major arts is pretty amazing. And so, we try and go to big symphony performances, pops concerts, and that kind of thing. And then, the food scene here is great. The bar scene here is great. Just like kind of seeing the new stuff that's popping up. But arts, try and be outdoors. Mount Airy is a great place to go hiking.
I love it.
It's 11 minutes from downtown or whatever. Like it's in San Francisco, we hiked all the time, but it might be an hour and a half drive to get to the really great spots. And Mount Airy is just like sitting there in the middle of the city. So there's a lot. Yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff like that around the city. I
feel like Mount Airy it should be, utilized more because it's like the huge urban park and it's on the bus line. Like for anyone who doesn't have a car, like you can jump on a bus and go to Mount Airy, go hiking, maybe wash your boots off before you get back on the bus, but maybe not. I don't know. But yeah, that's a great spot.
Yeah, that's a huge, I had never been to Mount Airy except for this summer. And it's much larger than Davao, right? I love Davao because the views of the city are great and the trails are really steep. So it's a great workout. But Mount Airy, like I was surprised at the size. Like we have a ton of green space in Cincinnati. And I believe University of Cincinnati I might have to get corrected on this, but I do believe that I thought they were number one at one point for the most green space on a college campus.
I would bet for an urban college campus.
Yeah, for an urban. Right. Yeah. So but I'll have to check on that. But I think people, when they come from like California, because I've had friends visit, they're like, whoa, it's so much more green. They expect like cornfields. And I think that they're shocked at the rolling hills and the greenery. So
yeah, it's a beautiful city. It really, I agree. Like even friends from Indiana are like, wait, Cincinnati is so green. Like you just drive up 71 and you're like, it's just it's a very green city. Yeah. It's great.
When I moved to California, that's what I missed. Like it was a weird feeling, but like there's so much desert out there. There's not, like I remember telling people, they're like, what do you miss? I'm like, greenery. Like I literally.
Where were you in California?
I was in Orange County and I was in LA.
Yeah.
But I mean, you had a little bit further up north, it's different situation, but I remember the first time I went camping out there, I was like, this is not camping. We were in dirt and there's no trees. There's no privacy. I'm like, why are we doing this? Yeah. What are we doing here? It's just sand, dirt and sand and no privacy. So I think the camping here is pretty cool as well.
Yeah.
What have you learned about yourself as an entrepreneur? Like what did that kind of expose to you that you didn't realize?
I mean, there's so many things. I think it really does force you to like reckon with yourself, your thoughts, your capabilities, your talents and your deficiencies, because there's really no one to fall back on, in a bigger organization, a corporation, kind of work on your specialty. And even if there's something that is in your realm that you're not quite as good at, there's usually someone or another resource to at least to help pick up the slack. And that just like doesn't exist in entrepreneurship. So I think I very much realized what are the things I'm good at and not good at, what are the things I like to do and don't like to do. A lot of those things I think I already knew, but some of them I think came as a surprise sometimes. And, I think I find that we're trying to move as fast as we can, but like, just like everyone, I mean, there are days when I just like am not feeling it and procrastinate and like stop work early and turn on like an episode of White Lotus or whatever, right? Like there are just like those days happen sometimes, and I think it's fine. You can't do that all the time, but
it's not just me.
Yeah,
watching World Cup right now.
Yeah, exactly, with the World Cup. Yeah, and it's just I think I realized that you kind of kick yourself sometimes because like the whole idea of entrepreneurship is like you're on your own time. You're not working for anybody, right? You can do whatever you want. It's like but that usually means you're working instead of going to happy hour at 5:00 like your friends who are in the corporate world. So, I think have learned to be okay with taking those breaks when just mentally I'm not there. But it's not always easy to do that. It's sometimes you feel like you should be still kind of like charging ahead because your to-do list is a mile long.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Really Good Box Wine has grown and headcount. Who's on your team that's helping you, deliver this great product?
I have this amazing sort of was my secret weapon for the first 9 months or so, and she's now full time. Our COO, her name's Amy Troutmiller, 25 years wine industry veteran. Has been a sommelier since she was in her mid 20s, and has worked.
Wow.
She was global buying for the Ritz-Carlton. She's done import from overseas. She's done distribution. She's sort of worked the full gamut of the wine industry. She started a couple of businesses herself.
Mm-hmm.
And so she came on board. Let me back up. About a month after I did my first test launch in Cincinnati, I was like, oh boy, the wine industry is really specialized. I need someone with me who knows wine.
Yeah.
Like it was a very, very, talk about like, what do you learn that you don't know? Like wine, like it's a relationship driven business. Everyone knows each other. Like I got to find someone who knows wine. So brought her on as a consultant, and she was amazing. And we would not be where we are without her. And then around March or April of last year, I went to her after we'd sort of extended her time on the business. I was like, what's going to take for you to come on full time as our COO? And she's like, oh my gosh, Jake, really? Because she's like built this successful consulting business. And I was like, just think about it. I was like, and she came back a couple weeks later. She's like, I can't say no to this. I've got to do it. So she started August 1st, kind of officially as the COO of the business. And then about, I guess, November 7th was his start date. We hired a VP of sales. So we're going to start moving more into kind of wholesale and bars and restaurants and events and that kind of thing. And so we hired a VP of sales who's in LA, actually. And similarly, like 25-year industry veteran in wine. He's worked on more premium wine brands than you can count. He actually started his career in the music industry and called on Cincinnati. So he actually knows Cincinnati pretty well, but he worked for Richard Branson at Virgin in the early 2000s and a few other things in the late 90s. So I was a big believer in like, if we're going to do this, we need to get really high, like really, really high quality talent, and have been slow to hire and very selective, but where we need it, really finding the best people we can.
Yeah, definitely. That's like crucial for starting a business, is finding those people who have the assets, the abilities that you may have shortcomings. So that's
totally
great. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, Rick's has a Rolodex that he can pick up and call the main distributor in probably all 50 markets in the United States to introduce them to the brand. He's not cold emailing, he's picking up and calling the owner of them. So he's an amazing resource too.
Where was he prior to Really Good Boxed Wines? You said
he was doing, gosh, he's worked on lots of different brands. He worked for Coupe for a while. The most recent thing he was doing, he was consulting.
Okay, that's what I was curious about.
He was consulting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and sort of was like the in-house sales, or the outsourced sales lead basically for a wine brand. But I think, I think he was really excited about Really Good Boxed Wine, and coming out of COVID wanted to get back like fully immersed in a brand. And when we put the job rec out there, we got a lot of interest, and there were a few very qualified, and we did a bunch of interviewing, but like Rick really stood out. Like we kind of knew, even from the first conversation, we kind of knew, and we did the diligence with him and everybody, and maybe 4 or 5 others, but we had a good feeling about him from the beginning.
That's cool.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Especially it speaks to the concept and what you're doing when you have 25-year veterans that are just like giving up their jobs and their dreams to.
I think even more so that they're coming from consultancy, where they get to touch a lot of exciting things, and then deciding like, no, this one thing is what I want to focus on, is really cool.
I have felt very lucky to have the two of them be so excited about the brand, and I feel I feel their like passion for it. When we talk to them every day, it's great. It's one of the most fun parts of being an entrepreneur, is getting to like create a team around you that shares the vision, and we can all like build this thing together. And there's no hierarchy. I mean, there's 3 people running this company right now, and then we have a winemaker who is contracted. We have a bunch of contractors and agencies and stuff like that. But really, there are 3 people running this thing, and I mean, it's whatever we got to do to go build it, we do, right? And it's that's part of the fun of it, though.
That's awesome.
What is the next step for really good box wine? Obviously, right now you're in that stage of just like getting it out there. But as far as like your big picture plan, what's your main goal with really good box wines? Like,
yeah, I mean, I think I really see an opportunity to truly like be a disruptive force in the industry and start to help change the industry for the better. I mean, people don't realize the environmental impact of glass bottles. It's not really talked about. And I think people assume because it's glass that it's actually a pretty sustainable way to package wine.
I'd love for you to kind of go into that because that is my assumption. That
everyone
glass
talks about
good,
plastic.
You know?
Everyone talks about plastic.
And plastic's not great either.
No, of course not.
Yeah, plastic's not great. But so glass is very heavy. It takes a lot of energy to produce. It has to be protected when it ships, right? So that it doesn't break. And it holds for the size of it holds a relatively small amount of liquid, right? So like our box, which I didn't bring one, unfortunately, you factor all those pieces together. A lot of times they're made overseas. They're shipped on freight ships empty with a bunch of styrofoam that's protecting it from breaking. It shows up on the shores. It has to be put on a truck and taken to whatever distributor, which then sells them out to wineries. Then they're filled. You need corks, which is also not that great for the environment. And then they need to be protected again and distributed out. So there's a lot of touch points. They're really heavy. They've got to be protected. And then unfortunately, the EPA says that less than a third of glass bottles are recycled. The real number is likely far fewer than that are like properly recycled. And so you have this really this really heavy material that is just ending up in landfills. And when you factor all of those things in, you're like, oh my gosh, like the amount of energy that's required to like have glass in our ecosystem right now, for something that's as disposable as wine, you drink it usually in the night or maybe two and then toss it, is a really major hit to the environment. So our box and bag replaces 4 glass bottles, 4 corks, labels, all of the packaging that needs to protect the glass. We make our boxes in California and ship them a couple hundred miles instead of 10,000 miles across the ocean. And then they weigh half as much. And so we can fit twice as much wine onto a pallet as you can with bottles. So you start factoring all this in, you're like, there's actually almost at every single touch point, every piece, it's a better environmental impact. The bags are a problem. It is not a perfect solution. They are plastic bags. They can be recycled the way that like plastic grocery bags can. You can send them back to us and we will recycle them. But there is innovation happening to try to improve the bags and try and find biodegradable options or try and create a more formal kind of system, sort of like Nespresso pods that are like they're like really, really recycling them. And
like you can take the nozzle off and open it up and refill it.
Yeah. Well, there's some challenges around oxygen getting into your wine, so that would be tough. But it would be more like a nail back program, but like a facility where like we're really processing them instead of sort of processing the same way plastic grocery bags are. So, it's not a perfect solution. It's definitely the best that we have today. And, part of my passion is helping to like be even more innovative in this space. But the other side of really good box, asking what's kind of the vision and the future for it. Like wine has a pretentious kind of reputation, especially higher end wine. It feels very unreachable and unattainable for people. And boxed wine breaks that down a little bit. Like you sort of, by the nature of the format, are making it a little bit more accessible for people. And the idea of, to use sort of an overused term, like democratizing access to really great wine, I think is part of the vision as well. And the wines that we're putting in our boxes, a lot of them like you really can't get unless you go to Sonoma and sit down in the tasting room at these vineyards, or you're going to a specialty wine store and paying $40 or $50, and that just isn't accessible for a lot of people. Yeah. Right. And so spreading the ability to introduce great wine to more people is a big part of the brand's vision as well.
If I'm not mistaken, I'm not a wine connoisseur by any means, but one of the differences with your boxed wine compared to a lot of the earlier boxed wines is that you actually will use a single grape rather than blends and things like that.
Oh, wow.
Is there reasoning behind it? Is
Yeah.
it taste? Like what's the thought
Totally.
process?
Yeah, so all of our wines have a vintage, a varietal, and show the region that the wine comes from. And it not only gives the wine a sense of place, which is sort of an abstract idea, it means you actually know what you're drinking, basically, right? And so you see a lot of lower end wines, whether it's boxed or bottled, that it might say California Red or California Sauvignon, Cabernet Sauvignon, or something like that. And they're probably blending in grapes from massive commercial vineyards that they're buying for, you know, a 20th of what we're paying for our wine. And it's just massive commercial vineyards instead of the real like boots on the ground care for winemaking, hand-picked, hand-produced wines like we're making. And, you know, a lot of wine is an agricultural product, unlike beer and spirits where you can bring stuff in from all over the world and kind of make more. Wine is basically grapes fermented. Like that's really all it is. And if those grapes don't taste good, then the wine doesn't taste good. And so a lot of the lower end wines use a lot of additives, and they add things like mega purple that sweeten the wine or add color to it or whatever, right? Like that is a very common. And some of the additives are okay. Some of them are not great.
The reason why you have a hangover, maybe?
Some of them are the reason why you have a hangover.
Yeah.
So our wines are like super low intervention. We have no additives in our wines. They're very low intervention because we want you to taste the grapes the way that they're meant to be tasted. And that's the way higher end wines are made.
Yeah.
I don't know if this is something you can speak to, but the sulfates and sulfites, that's like been a big like thing lately. And I feel like a lot of people like don't even know what it is or what.
Sulfites. I actually can speak to this.
Yay.
Sulfites are one of the greatest inventions that we have for preserving wine. And adding sulfites, I get the desire to not like add lots of extra sulfites, but sulfites are an amazing preservative. They have zero impact on your health. And you know, the turkey sandwich from the deli meat that you bought at Kroger has more sulfites in it than your average bottle of wine. So it's become a little bit of like the boogeyman in the wine industry. And you know, we don't call our wines natural wines. I think by a lot of definitions, you would call our wines natural wines, other than the fact that we have some sulfites. We don't add a bunch of extra sulfites, but we have sulfites that keeps the wine tasting the same way. It's become a boogeyman that's sort of not. It's a little disingenuous, I think. The true attack on it. What I do very much believe in is not adding a bunch of other like. Some people filter with egg whites. People add this chemical called mega purple. There's so many things that are added to wine. And like, those are the things I actually think that we should be paying attention to. Wine that has a little bit of sulfite. I mean, sulfites are naturally occurring in the ground.
Yeah.
And those, which is why in the back of even a lot of I'm air quoting here for people listening, that quote unquote natural wines, you might look on the back and it still says contains sulfites because there's naturally occurring sulfites in grapes in the ground.
Yeah. Interesting.
Cool. That is interesting. Was that crazy? Because is there a sulfates and a sulfites, or is it just sulfites?
It's sulfites.
It is like, why have I heard?
I don't know.
I don't know why.
I mean, we don't pronounce everything correctly in Cincinnati.
It's
that
true.
might be the
I literally
issue
thought there were two different words. He's like, I'll speak to the real one.
Yeah.
See, this is what goes to show like the little. Like wine, like you said, it's such a specialty industry.
Yeah.
And I love that this is approachable.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's hilarious. Okay, so we usually like to ask our guests, and you have experience of getting out of the city and you're from here. You're the perfect person to ask. What do you feel is like the biggest misconception about the city? You've done a great job of explaining like why Cincinnati is so great, especially for small business owners, but from like your friends that are still in California that are like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
What do you feel is the biggest misconception?
I just think like people lump us in with every other Midwest city.
Mm-hmm.
Like people in California, they could not everybody. This is a terrible generalization for people who I love, but a lot of people may not be able to point to Ohio on a map. I mean, if they probably can find Ohio, but they wouldn't know where in the city, where in the state Cincinnati sits, and that kind of thing. So, like the sense of geography, I think when you're on the coast, the Midwest is sort of a blob, generally, for people there. So I think what's missed is the like. interesting nuances of the city and the complexity and the intelligence of the people and the great everything from like the great bars and restaurants to the great art scene that we were talking about to like there are really beautiful areas to go visit. The biggest cave system in the world is 3 hours south of here, right? Like there's a lot of really like interesting nuance in Cincinnati and then these kinds of cities that I think are just, it's a little bit of just like out of sight, out of mind. It's people just don't even think about it. Which I think is it makes it really hard for a city like Cincinnati to recruit people in from the coast because you're fighting through like just sort of cognitive dissonance almost about the entire region. Like it's not even like on people's consideration sometimes. Even though it has a lot to offer. And I think a lot of my friends in California, if they moved here, would like love it. And I have friends who have moved from New York or California to here who are not from here, are like, this is like the best kept secret in the world. Yeah. And we're like, I know.
This is great. We can afford to live
friends.
here.
Yeah, tell your friends. But yeah, it's hard. It's hard for, and I know I'm talking a little bit more broadly about cities, Cincinnati and other cities in the Midwest like it, but yeah, it's hard for us to break through and kind of share with people how great of a city it is.
Definitely. Yeah. Where do you see, I guess it's kind of a twofold question. Where do you see the city going in the next 5 to 10 years? And what do you hope to see from the city in the next 5 to 10 years?
It's a good question. I mean, I love that we have young leadership in the city. You know, AFTAB, I think has given us a great kind of jolt of energy as a city and as a young progressive city. And I hope that we continue to be a kind of young progressive city and take risks. I love Blink was incredible.
Yeah.
Like Blink is like, it's an example of like, Blink doesn't happen in San Francisco.
No.
It just doesn't happen. And I hope that we're able to share more of that kind of stuff. I hope we can do more Blinks and equivalent and things like that to really introduce what's great about the city to the world. I think I have a background in education and went to Walnut Hills and all of that. And, I hope that we can do so in a way that respects local, populations and people who have lived in places for a long time. And gentrification is good in a lot of ways, but it has a lot of bad externalities. And I think we need to keep being super conscious of the impact on neighborhoods as they grow and change and different people move in and respect our neighbors and respect the communities that they've built. And I hope that continues. I think it's happened in some areas in Cincinnati really well, and it's happened in some areas in Cincinnati really poorly. And I'm not going to say which of the things are on those lists, but I hope that we really keep an eye on that as the city develops.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. We have had a lot of guests mention that, especially in OTR. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of people that, it's the way that our city has developed like since 2010, it's been rapid and compared to past years. So those are really good points.
It seems like, it's something that as you mentioned, we're not perfect at. We do have issues, as does any place. Every city has gentrification, positive and negative, and but it seems like it's an ongoing conversation that it's out in the open, and everyone is, not everyone, but people are leading the conversation, which is good.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
We have a tricky question for you.
Okay.
We ask all of our guests this. If you could describe Cincinnati in one word or phrase, what would it be? And I can give you samples. Brad's always like, I don't remember. Yeah. So down to play, talent,
catalytic.
Catalytic.
That's my favorite.
That's your favorite one. Yeah. Catalytic.
This is a good word.
I think it was like welcoming. So just something, you've spoken a lot about Cincinnati and obviously being from here, a lot of positive things. So this is why it's tricky, because it's word or phrase.
Yeah.
You can go for it.
Underrated.
Yeah. I love it. We agree.
Yeah, we agree. The name of our podcast is
That's
Underrated.
Right. Maybe there was something psychologically in
I
there,
love it, though. This is perfect.
Absolutely. The whole idea of the concept of the podcast was, conversations we've had with friends where, Oftentimes the person you're talking to that lives here loves living here, but there's almost like a shyness to it. Like, oh yeah, like it is great, but trying to compare it to New York or LA.
Yeah.
It's not New York or LA, but we have great things going on here, and that's 100%. We think it's very underrated.
I think what I was going through my mind was this whole idea of like sort of small, like a small big city kind of thing. Like,
I know it's so hard to describe that. Like,
and it's the whole idea of like we have professional sports teams. We have we're the smallest city with all the major arts organizations.
Yeah.
We have world Fortune 100 companies here. Like we have some of the best companies in the world here. And so
it's a great point. I mean, there are, we don't need to mention them, but like other similar Midwest, similar size cities that those sports organizations have left for, plenty of reasons. Yeah. But it seems really secure. Like the Reds really aren't good this year. They weren't good this year, but I don't think they're going anywhere. Yeah. And hopefully the leadership at the Reds figures out how to put together a better team so that we don't ever have to risk that. But
we've got the Bengals just crushing it. Yeah. Which is so much fun.
Yeah. We deserve it.
Joe Burrow is amazing.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. The whole team is amazing.
Yeah.
Burrow, rightly so, gets so much credit, but I mean, it's a young, fun, feisty, hardworking team that seems, at least on the outside, seems to like each other, work well in the locker room. There doesn't seem to be a lot of like cancer in the locker room, which can happen with big personalities, especially young personalities. So it's been fun. It's really fun seeing the Bengals do what they're doing right now.
Yeah, especially for us born and raised here. It's like we don't. Did you get that when you moved to California, where everyone was trying to like, oh, now you got to like the Dodgers. Now you got to like the. I'm like, no, it doesn't work like that.
No
like,
chance. Well, I moved to Philly for 4 years.
Oh yeah.
And I mean, there is no sports fan like a Philly sports fan.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I was like, if I had to pick if I had to pick an NFC football team to be a fan of, it would be the Eagles. But it's a far, far, far distant second to the Bengals. It always has been.
I like to think of good Jake, with a Bengals gear, and then like dark Jake as the Eagles fan, like burning a building down or something.
They do not mess around.
Yeah,
like the Flyers fans. The Flyers fans are wild.
Yeah. So we're gonna release this in spring 23.
Okay.
Looking forward, really good box wine. Do you have anything on the radar that might be releasing around that time, or anything that you want to talk about?
I would say, go to reallygoodboxwine.com and check out whatever we have at that time. We have some wines, just like any great wine, we produce a certain amount of it, and when it sells out, it's gone. And so, some of the wines that we have right now are running a little low, and so we may be out of them. But we do have some plans to release some new wines in the next 3 or 4 months. So the best way is just to go to reallygoodboxwine.com and take a look. And we are starting to roll out more directly into, bars, restaurants, stuff like that. And Cincinnati is one of our first markets. So I don't know exactly what that will look like when the podcast comes out. That's part of the beauty of the startup world. Like 3 months, like me thinking about the spring of next year is like, is that 3 years away? Like how far away are we? But we're definitely working hard to kind of get that out the door. So in 3 months, take a look and see if you see some really good box wine at your local restaurant or bar, or pick it up in your local shop.
Yeah. And you're on all the social media, like Instagram, all that too.
Yep. Instagram's probably the place we're the most active. We've tossed around, what does our TikTok presence look like?
You're going to dance in videos?
We'll see. I'm not the best dancer. And a little Facebook and Twitter and stuff. But Instagram's really where we have our biggest social presence. Yeah.
Cool.
That actually reminded me, because you said your wife is she's a subscriber. So I don't think
believe so. It shows up often enough that she should be.
She probably should be.
Yeah, she should be on the subscription to get the discount.
Yeah, that's my question. So obviously the website, you can buy single, but you do have a subscription plan?
We do. Yeah, you can subscribe monthly, and you can either get 1 box, 2 boxes, or 2 boxes, or 3 boxes a month. And there's some benefits. You get 10% off all your shipments. You get free shipping all the time. So right now you get free shipping if you spend $100 or more. But anything under than that, we don't ask the customer to cover everything, but we ask to subsidize it a little bit. So there's a little bit of a shipping cost that's waived. We have sort of a sommelier concierge service that sort of can have one-to-one conversations about planning parties or pairings or whatever.
Oh, that's cool.
And
That's very cool.
and then we do all of our new releases, our first release to our subscribers. So, the one that's coming out on December 1st will be a subscriber only for the first certain period. We haven't released. Well, this will already be in the past anyway, but we haven't released yet how long it will be only subscriber. But for now, to start, it'll be subscriber only. And then the next ones we do for at least a period of time are always exclusively subscribers. So, there's some fun perks. We're working on I want it to be a community. Like, we're working on other ways to add value to people if they decide that they want to subscribe. We have a master sommelier who's backed the brand. And at one point we did like a sort of like a tasting webinar, sort of like fun podcast style almost thing with Andy where subscribers could join in and kind of like taste along with us. So we do some fun kind of like programming stuff with our subscribers.
I love that.
Yeah.
Do you say so online is obviously the biggest presence and you're going into bars and restaurants, and what about stores? I know you said local stores. Is that's also in the works to make it available?
Yeah.
Okay.
To buy
on shelves.
On shelves.
Yeah.
On shelves places.
Nice.
Yeah.
Can you ship to all 50 states? I know some of those laws get a little weird.
43 states plus DC.
Cool.
Right now.
That's a lot.
There's a handful that there's a couple that technically we could get the licensing for, but that's so prohibitive that it's not worth it. And then I think there's 5 states that just flat out don't allow a winery to ship direct to its residents. Yeah. But the rest of them we've got, we're shipping.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Ohio and Kentucky are both on that list and have been from the beginning. So anyone in Ohio and Kentucky listening can order it.
Cool.
Yeah.
Indiana?
And Indiana.
Indiana too. Okay, Indiana. Good. And the liquor laws in Indiana are a little crazy.
Is it California? Is that one where you can't ship direct to customers?
You can in California.
You can. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know why I thought that was one of them.
Yeah, it's like Delaware, Mississippi, Rhode Island, and a handful of others.
Oh wow.
Weird.
It's sort of it's kind of some random states, honestly. It's not.
That's good that there's like smaller and not.
Yeah. Not the big ones.
Yeah.
That's it for us. Anything
that was
else
so fun.
You're
That was great.
Interesting person.
It was awesome. This was a lot of fun.